Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. 1, 2.
Sorry.
You know the count.
Yeah, the count thing. Oh, yeah, how does that go?
1, 2.
Bob Dylan said a song is anything that can walk by itself, you know. And Squeeze have written some songs that walk by themselves.
There's probably a lot of people that don't, you mention the name Squeeze, they don't necessarily know who you're talking about, but they do know the songs.
Squeeze was definitely considered sort of a solid seminal band who, you know, who could really write.
They've written lots of songs that I've loved so much I just wanted to hear again or play again, and have enjoyed playing and loved playing and loved listening to.
There's no other, tempted by the fruit of another, tempted but the truth is discovered.
I don't think there's many groups that could write at that level.
The songs were about London. The songs were even about, even if you wanted to be particular, the songs were actually about South London.
In and out of Wandsworth with the numbers on their names. It's funny how the missus always looks a bleeding same. And meanwhile at the station there's a couple of likely lads who swear like as your father, and they're very cool for cats, they're cool for cats.
I was painting what I was seeing lyrically, and I think Glenn was doing the same with the music.
We had a sound that was all our own. No one else sounded like us.
It's really been so welcome, you never seem to change. A grape to tempt your leisure, romantic gesture strange. My ego flies tomorrow, it's a game I treasure dear, to seek the helpless future. My love at last, I'm here. Take me, I'm yours, because dreams are made of this. Forever there'll be a heaven in your kiss.
I was brought up in southeast London. I had an elder brother. He was 7 years older than me. I remember him buying the Beatles' first EP, and that making a big impression on me, although I was a bit of a Cliff and the Shadows fan, being, 5, 6. I remember pestering my mum to get some sort of instrument, and eventually an aunt gave us a piano. So that was the first instrument I had, and I used to love playing that. And then a year later, I got a guitar. The first song that I ever wrote, I Dreamt. I can play the song now, and I was 11.
Now you're gone, you're taking my dreams away. I'm left alone, and I just don't know what to do. Lonely without you. When you left me, life was hard, but you left me alone by myself to die.
Right, for a chorus, it's not bad.
My first introduction to music was in my parents' house in Greenwich, and my brothers were older than me, 10 and 12 years older than me, and so they would battle for the stereogram. So 1 minute you'd be listening to the Rolling Stones and Bo Diddley, and the next minute it would be the Beatles and the Searchers. I used to write poetry on my school book, and an English teacher picked up on them, and instead of telling me off like all the other teachers did, he actually said it was quite an inspirational thing for me to be doing at that age. And I guess somewhere in the subconscious, something said to me these poems could become music at some stage. When I was at school, and I was probably 14, I read Pete Townshend's interview in The Melody Maker about going around the world and meeting women and making money and taking drugs and all that sort of thing. I thought, hold on a minute, this is the job for me.
I did think that was an appealing side to what I wanted to do, but it was very much secondary to the thrust of wanting to play music,
I really wanted to be in a gang, I wanted to be in a band like The Who and the Small Faces, and I couldn't do that on my own. So I put an advert in a sweet shop window to see if I could form a band, really.
I've been together with Maxine, my first really proper girlfriend, for about a year and a bit, and we saw this advert in Blackheath Village that Chris had put up saying he wanted a guitarist for a band. His influences were the Kinks, Lou Reed and Glenn Miller.
And I pretended that I had a record deal and that I had tours booked and all sorts of things. I just laced it up as much as I could just to see who would pick up the phone, you know. And Glenn was the only person that picked up the phone.
I don't think I would have answered it by myself. Maxine said, go on, give it a go, you know, you've got nothing to lose. Between when we met and 3 years after, that was the most we ever hung out. And pretty soon after we met, we wrote one song. And without ever discussing it, it was the way that... it was a template for the way that we carried on working, which was Chris gave me lyrics and I beavered away with tunes. And I was absolutely happy with that.
We met in April of 73, and by July, August, together we'd written 50 songs. And we talked about Top of the Pops a lot, and how we'd really love to be on Top of the Pops. That seemed to be our goal. When we first decided to form a band, we didn't have a name for it at that point, Jools was the first to be recruited because Jools and Glenn were friends at school. And he played boogie-woogie piano, which I'd never heard of. So it was unique, you know, he had a fantastic style and very charismatic kind of guy.
The elements that we all had, we felt as though we were pretty clever. We were quite, I wouldn't say we were big-headed, but we had that thing, which a lot of people in bands have. They sort of play in a pub and stuff, and they start when they're sort of 16, they assume they're going to be big. And of course, but with us, it worked out, and it was true.
And then our first bass player was Harry.
We had a good following. We had all the Deptford and Greenwich and Blackheath and Lewisham following, and they loved us.
And then we had various drummers. Eventually, Gilson joined the band after an ad in the Melody Maker.
I think I was the only one that actually owned their own drum kit. And I borrowed my mum's car, Minnie, and I took the seats out to get my kit in there, drove down and auditioned with them and got the job, and that was it.
So Gilson came and joined, and that changed everything. That then formed us into the thing that we needed to be.
Backtrack, back on the track, no one understands me. Backtrack, back on the track, back to the way we used to love. Back on the track, back on the track, backtrack, backtrack, backtrack.
It was the Jubilee, 1977, around that period. Punk was just coming along. The old guard were being pushed out, if you like. All that early King Crimson stuff that I listened to at school suddenly was put at the back of my record collection, and the Clash were now at the front.
There were so many groups that had just come up, the first flush of punk, and people that didn't know how to play really hardly at all. And they really were, I think, a cut above just their solidity and the fact that they were writing their own stuff, and it was very much its own thing.
We really were the thing that was supposed to be punk, but we weren't quite aware of it. We didn't have Mohicans, but our musical spirit was that it was a bit of like we couldn't care less.
We made our own record on Deptford Fun City. By that time we had a manager, Miles Copeland, who was managing us, had connections in the music industry, and so he invited A&M Records down, and they just signed the Sex Pistols. And Derek Green from A&M Records signed us.
John Cale produced the first album, who was with the Velvet Underground, and Miles Copeland, the manager, was friendly with new John Cale, and he was the one who put Squeeze and John Cale together.
John Cale sort of threw everything out and made us write new songs for him.
And he just looked me straight in the face. He said, "You've got to stop writing love songs." He said, "What do you know about love?" He said, "I want you to write something about something that you've never been attached to." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, imagine being whipped by women and being sexually harassed and being tied up and tied to a chair and women sort of licking you all over, and I've hardly been born. What are you talking about? I had all that to come, you know."
Sex Master, I mean... yeah, we had a go.
Sex Master
just thought, this isn't going to get us on top of the pops at all.
We delivered the album to A&M Records, and they said, we love it, but there's no single on there. And John had gone back to America by then.
And then we did the single, Take Me, I'm Yours. And that was very much run in the way Glenn wanted to run it musically. And he wanted to use a sequencer and altogether a more sophisticated approach somewhat than the rest of the album.
So we got a load of synths in and played about in the studio for a day, and Take Me, I'm Yours is what came out.
I've come across the desert to greet you with a smile. My camel looks so tired, it's hardly worth my while to tell you of my travels across the golden deep.
The whole Squeeze formula was the singing where Glenn and Chris sang at the same time. Glenn was singing and Chris was singing one octave lower, and that was the Squeeze sound.
Take me, I'm yours, because dreams are made of this. Forever there'll be a heaven in your kiss.
The first time I heard the record being played, it was probably on John Peel or on a programme like that. And then going on Top of the Pops for the first time, great, we made it. You know, we got picked up in Rolls-Royce cars that the record company had sent. You know, the only time a Rolls-Royce had been down my estate was, you know, somebody had died.
I walked down to the local pub, and when I walked in, there was a lunchtime stripper, and she was taking her clothes off to Take Me, I'm Yours. And I thought, we cracked it. Now we're getting somewhere.
When we recorded the first album, Miles and Squeeze had it in our back pocket that we were going to tour America. So we hired a van, we put all the gear in the back, and we literally drove all the way around America for 6-7 weeks, staying at little motels, playing horrible little clubs.
We went for 3 weeks and stayed 2 months and really lived in each other's pocket. And if we were tight before, we were really tight when we got back. We just played and played and played. So we took that experience into the studio.
And Davy Crockett rides around and says it's cool for cats, it's cool for cats.
When we got to record the Cool for Cats album, we had a lot of the songs already written, and by that time we were a little bit more focused on what we wanted as a band, I suppose. The sound was becoming more apparent to itself, with Jools on the one hand, with his eccentric keyboard, the magnificent drumming of Gilson, which added so much to the songs. And Glenn was really beginning to find his feet, I think.
I took sort of control of things at that point. And we're a band of very strong personalities, and I think I made myself very popular.
He took on more control of the melodies and the way that records should be, with the production, I guess, you know. I was a little bit more interested in just going to the pub and having a drink.
To change the mood a little, I've been posing down the pub. I'm seeing my reflection, I'm looking slightly rough.
And we were always in the pubs. That was our world from which we sort of came up from above the parapets, you know.
Most of what I was writing on the Cool for Cats album and albums that followed were from the imagination, but taken from characters that I'd met.
He, as a poet and an artist, was responding to his world around him, and he was writing that world down and putting it into words and making it into songs.
We were absolutely reflecting what we'd seen and bouncing it back.
I think one of the outstanding features of Squeeze was that they reflected their environment, that the songs were about their own geography.
The Junction was pretty much inspired by Play for Today's that I used to watch when I was a kid. Those kind of kitchen sink dramas that were on Wednesday nights in black and white. They would be half an hour long and they would tell a story from beginning to end, and I would watch those and marvel at the way that they were put together, and there's some fantastic writers that wrote those in those days. So the idea of storytelling being something that began, had a middle and an ending, was always in my life from a very early age.
Chris had written story songs before, but this one, to me, really stood out.
This is a copy of the handwritten lyric of Up the Junction, and it's nice to see it again. And it brings back a lot of memories of the way I used to write. I used to write in with a pen, and on this piece of paper, it resembles every piece of paper. Every lyric that I wrote was like this in those days. I never thought it would happen with me and a girl from Clapham out on the windy common that night I ain't forgotten. When she dealt out the rations with some or other passions, I said, "You're our lady." Perhaps she said, "I may be."
We were already in the studio recording, and at lunchtime, the band went out to get their cheese and ham rolls, and I stayed behind and looked at this lyric, and it was one of those lovely occasions where I didn't really have to work at anything.
And it must be a real struggle sometimes for Glenn to get my lyrics and think, how am I going to put music to this? What emotion does it seek?
Some of the best stuff I've done has been to work instinctively and to not think through the process. It's not conscious thought. It's not this has to be this or that, or it's just about finding something that fits and flows, and that's the way that it works best for me.
Music, in a way, it's kind of jolly, but you really feel a sense of heartbreak in it, and I think that's a very difficult thing to pull off.
I went all through the winter, the weather brought some bitter. I put away a tenner, it's sweet to make a bitter.
Unwitting key change, it worked out brilliantly. It was a total accident.
When the time was ready, I had to sell the telly. Evenings by the fire with little kicks inside her. This morning at 4:50, I took her rather nifty down to an incubator. But 30 minutes later, she gave birth to a daughter. Within a year, a walker. She looked just like a mother. If there could be another.
When I was at school, we used to read all the books that they made the movies of in the 60s. We didn't get to read the great literature. We read Sillitoe and Waterhouse and all those things. I was part of that experiment. And Chris had that, but he had it in a 3-minute song.
I knew it was a great song because people really enjoyed the lyric of it, and when we played it live, people enjoyed it. And that's the greatest test, isn't it? I mean, if you write a great song, people in the audience smile and they love it and they take the story home with them. That's really the job that you have as a songwriter, for people to own the stories themselves.
Alone here in the kitchen, I feel there's something missing. I beg for some forgiveness, but begging's not my business. And she won't write a letter, although I always tell her. And so it's my assumption I'm really up the junction.
And I remember we were doing very, very well in Britain. We were number 2 in the charts, and we were travelling around and playing drinking dens in North America, and it was so weird.
Up the Junction was selling like 15,000 copies a day, which is a lot of records. And the industry was on fire in those days. People were selling lots of records. The industry's completely changed now. If I sold, 15,000 records a day now, I'd be Adele. That's a fine thought. Between Call for Cats and Argybargy, I had met a girl who I married, and she lived in New York. And when one of the gang gets married, the dynamic does change. And although everybody was very supportive, I sensed the change.
As great as our writing was, Chris and I were already heading in different directions, I didn't feel particularly close to anyone in the band. But we were a great band, so I didn't really worry about all that. And as long as we got on with the work, and then we'd pick off and have our social lives, increasingly more separately.
Glenn was like a satellite that would come round the planet. And every now and again I would kind of tap into whatever it was he was beaming down, and then he would go off again. And likewise, I would do the same.
The cases pulled from under the bed. She made a call to a sympathetic friend and made arrangements. The
wrote the lyric for Another Nail in My Heart, I imagined it being like a barroom song, I guess. I didn't expect it to have a guitar solo after the first chorus.
I think that I thought with Another Nail, it's time for me not to be a blues guitarist or Jimi Hendrix, but it's time to work out a tune and to make the tune an absolutely vital part of the song.
Great guitar player, he's a tremendously underrated guitar player, because although he features them as part of an arrangement, he doesn't go in, I mean, I've seen him take longer solos, but he goes in for the melodic solo that's incorporated in the composition.
That stupid love that kills all your love. I want to be good, is that not enough? So play a song that makes it so tough. Another nail for my heart.
Glenn Tilbrook is one of the greatest singers in pop music that ever has walked the earth. He's unbelievable.
I'm sure it's annoying to all his peers. It still sounds amazing now. He hasn't lost any of that tone. It's incredible.
I've had a bad time, my love has resigned. I've been such a fool, I've loved the goodbye. And here in the bar, the piano man's found another nail for my heart.
He always sounded like he was smiling when he was singing. He just always sounded quite happy about whatever was going on, and it just made you feel good. A Squeeze song would come on the radio, and it just made me smile. And part of it was just his voice, just something about the sound of his voice.
The thing that I think that Glenn is so good at in singing Chris's words is he can take idioms that are not found in ordinary pop lyrics and make them really singable.
They do it down on Kansas, they do it Lazing about the beach all day night, the cricket's creepy.
Pulling Mussels from Shell was written as a sort of very stoned dirge, I think. You know, it was a good tune, but it was about 3/4 slower than it ended up being. When I wrote Pulling Mussels, it was all white notes.
They do it down on campuses, they do it at Waikiki. Lazing about the beach all day and night, the cricket's creepy.
The great thing about writing with Glenn in those days was, you know, he would disappear for a few weeks and you wouldn't know what was going on, and then suddenly a cassette would arrive with all these demos on of these great songs, and it was just it was like Father Christmas coming. It was just brilliant, you know, to hear your lyrics put to music. And I would say, yeah, that's really brilliant. And you can hear actually from the brilliance of this demo how much it actually sounds like Squeeze. I mean, we didn't really fall very far from the tree with this demo, I think. Apart from Jools' fantastic piano playing and Gilson's wonderful drumming, John Bentley's amazing bass playing. Apart from that, it sounds exactly the same as Squeeze. But I still have a fondness for these demos. They're almost like songs in short trousers.
And the band injects you that sort of vigour into it, that sort of verve. But the song was there. The song was there already. One of the things about being dictatorial is that unless you have immense charm, you're going to create enemies, and I certainly think I did that. But everyone, I think, was happy with the band, except for Jools. You know, his piano playing was great on Pulling Mussels and all that stuff. It was fantastic and could only have been him. But a lot of the other stuff, the keyboard overdubs, some of the hooky stuff, the melody lines in Another Nail, and that I was doing. So, you know, that must have been either frustrating or annoying sometimes.
When I joined Squeeze, you know, he was as much a part of it as Glenn and Chris, really, to me. His style, not only his style of his playing, but his image and his style and his energy was a major factor towards the whole thing of Squeeze.
I take Sally Anna, you take Sue. We'll be working on what to do, don't no mess around.
The songs we were doing, we mostly did Chris and Glenn songs, and of course they were great, they were fantastic songs. But I've always ultimately been driven by the music that I play. That's what, rather than, you know, the idea of just being a successful group is great, of course you like that, but the real thrust of it has to be the music that you're playing.
He's such a gifted guy who was playing what he saw as, you know, what was pop music, some of which he liked and some of which he didn't.
Jools started to think about making his own albums, and quite rightly so, because he had a canon of his own work that he needed to express. He was never going to do that under the Squeeze banner because it was a vehicle put together by Glenn and I for our songs.
At that point, I thought the group was written in stone. We got John Bentley in, and John really took us to another level too. Everything was perfect as far as I was concerned. So when Jools left, I was really upset.
And I remember going to Gambadella's Cafe in Blackheath Village with Jools, and he said, you know, I'm going to have to leave the band. I've been offered this TV show. And I cried. You know, I remember crying and thinking, this is the end of the band.
It never was what it was again. You know, there was something there, a dynamic that just shifted.
The saddest thing for me, and I love the Squeeze music, was the people, because I love the people, and we used to have such a great laughs together, you know. But, of course, the more success there is, generally, the less of a laugh there is.
You won't get dressed, you walk about. Now is that the teasing glances push me out. Now
Squeeze had gone through this big turmoil. Jools had left the band and they were ready to record a new album. They had no keyboard player, and as they were going into the studio almost the following week to start to record East Side Story, they kind of offered me the job. Now, I don't know, I didn't know whether I was joining the band, if I was doing the album or what I was doing, but I was really just interested.
Paul brought such a lot to the table. His sense of musicality is absolutely total, and he can empathise with other people's ideas. I think the next record that we made, East Side Story, was our first sort of mature album, and I think we were pushing forward still at that point.
The original plan was, I don't know how realistic this was, whether it was ever real, but there was a sort of notion that East Side Story was going to be a double album, and there would be a side produced by Nick Lowe, a side produced by me, a side produced by Dave Edmunds, and a side produced by Paul McCartney. And I don't really know how far that conversation went, whether it was just something that was said over a couple of drinks, or whether it was ever more than a notion.
Elvis is a huge music enthusiast, you know, which an awful lot of musicians are not. But the second part of what he brought is the approval. You know, I'm Elvis Costello and I'm cool and edgy, and therefore some cool and edgy people will say, okay, I'll give Squeeze a try. That's how those things work.
I think when you're working with somebody externally too, that you both admire, it really raises the game.
Elvis Costello gave us the courage, I think, to step up and say, okay, we're not just this really great pop band, but we can do this as well.
She unscrews the top of a new whiskey bottle and shuffles about in her candlelit hovel like some kind of witch with blue fingers and mittens. She smells like the cat and the neighbors she sickens. The black and white TV is long seen a picture. The cross on the wall is a permanent fixture. The postman delivers the final reminders. She sells off her silver from poodles and China.
Label with Love, I was inspired by looking at a photograph in a photographic book, Cartier-Bresson, and there was this woman sitting at a bar, and, you know, I just suddenly got this image of this person sitting in a pub, and, you know, how in the Second World War she might have gone off with an American pilot.
During the wartime, an American pilot made every air-rated time of excitement. So she moved to his prairie and married the Texan. She learned from a distance how love was a lesson.
When I saw Label with Love, and indeed, really, with any of the songs that we wrote, there was never a direction from Chris as far as to what it should be. It was a totally open book for me, which was a lovely position to be in. It would just be what it conjured up in me, and to me, it seemed like it was a country song.
Drinks to remember me and myself. Winds up the clock, knocks dust from the shelf. Home is a love that I miss very much. So the past has been bottled and labeled with love. The past has been bottled and labeled with love. The past has been bottled and labeled with love.
I just thought the Label with Love was a good story song, and it didn't really matter what rhythm it was in. I think we were all of us getting a little worn out with that new wave rhythm. It hemmed in the storytelling, and they had taken their time over a couple of the earlier, like Up the Junction isn't really very fast. It's got a much more like the Kinks sort of feeling of space. And we're both, you know, all of us sort of jammed a lot of words in. Sometimes that can be exciting. Sometimes it gets in the way of the communication.
All I could do was think about, my God, this lyric's going to have to be sharp to get it past him. You know, it's like having an inspirational teacher when you're at school, isn't it?
I bought a toothbrush, some toothpaste, a flannel for my face, pajamas, a hairbrush, new shoes and a case. I said to my reflection, let's get out of this place. There's a church and a steeple, and this all flowed. Laundry on the hill, the billboards and the buildings, memories of it still keep calling and calling.
We were recording a version of Tempted, which Glenn was singing, and Elvis said, why don't Paul sing this? It seems natural for Paul to sing it.
They had this resource in the band of Paul Carrick, and that seemed, of all the songs that they had, the one that he could really transform.
I was delighted because I just thought it was such a great song.
I mean, I suppose privately, Glenn might have thought it was a bit of a liberty for me to suggest he didn't sing a song that he'd written, but...
Of course, I was immensely disappointed, and then as soon as he sang it, it just had to be. It just was so right. It was so great. It was so natural. I would never, ever, ever have sung it like that.
I bought a toothbrush, some toothpaste, a flannel for my face, pajamas, a hairbrush, new shoes and a case.
Tempted was literally written on the back of a fag box. I was going from Blackheath to Heathrow Airport, and I just wrote down what I saw.
Past the church and the steeple, the laundry on the hill, billboards and the buildings, memories of it still keep calling and calling. But forget it all, I know I will. Tempted by the fruit of another.
Tempted as a lyric really is again written for somebody else in my imagination. It's not particularly about me. You know, I was very loyal. I wasn't tempted by any fruits of any other person. No, it's just a lyric about an emotion that people go through.
Tempted by the fruit of another.
Paul had real difficulty getting around the lyrics of the second verse in his voice, in his vocal style, which is why the vocal arrangement idea came in, of this sort of crazy pseudo-Temptations arrangement.
I said it's no occasion. It's no story I tell.
And it makes me laugh every time I hear it, because I can't believe we got away with it, really. really. But it has a charm, you know, because it's obviously done with the affection for those original records.
East Side Story is a fantastic piece of work, and I'm proud of it all more than any other album in that respect. That's down to the amount of focus that Elvis Costello gave it, and the amount of work that Glenn and I put into it.
It was also nice for me to work with someone who I really respected and trusted, and so I could just be part of the band.
I really kept them to the strength of the material, because that's all I really knew how to do. I didn't really know anything about sound. I was kind of a musical advocate. Wasn't even a musical director, because they didn't need one.
She rips his skirt and tears a dress, climbing over his garden fence. But on the morning with tears still fall, she's in the mood for stuff it all. She feels messed around.
Around the East Side Story album, Glenn and I had a relationship that was beginning to suffer from fatigue, really, because we were constantly touring and there was no respite from it. Played Madison Square Garden. We'd done everything that we set out to do, Top of the Pops, television, everything.
We were getting bigger and bigger as a band, but it seemed like all the drive had gone out of it. There was no one to tell us to go and take a holiday or something like that. It was just the momentum was always going, right, we need an album, we need a tour, we need that. And we did all that, and at the end of it, you're just very tired.
Paul Carrack couldn't stay in the band because he wanted to do a solo album. So then we were wounded yet again. So we limped off to find another keyboard player and make another album, which was Sweets from a Stranger.
The hurt and the anger and the joy of the pain. Joy of the pain.
And Sweets from a Stranger, it was a period where everything was sort of drugs and doing vocals at 9 in the morning, it's not a good idea.
Now she's gone, now she's gone, and I'm out with a friend, out with a friend, with lips full of passion, and coffee in bed.
My drinking started to wound me quite a bit, but also I discovered other drugs, and I became dependent.
And I was drinking, I was going downhill, and I think other people were taking to life's pleasures a bit too much in other areas.
Oh, now she's gone.
And I remember being on a train going across Europe with Glenn at the end of that album, just saying, enough, can we take a break now? And we both said, let's call it a day.
The first stage of Squeeze from 78 to 82 produced all the hits, and we would be talking about Squeeze now in these terms if the band had split up forever in 1982 and had never come back.
We went off to record a solo album called Difford and Tilbrook, and I don't think we talked once during the whole recording of the album.
It was like a busman's holiday. They were back together. Same communication problems.
Glenn got married, and that too fractured our relationship. It was a very tense time.
When we went on tour, my wife came with me, and that made me happier. Chris wasn't someone to go out and socialise anyway with me, and hadn't been for a long time. So in a sense, not a lot had changed for me. I just had someone to enjoy it with.
And at the end of that 2-year period, we then had an opportunity to get Squeeze back together again. And it was almost like somebody had drawn the curtains. Suddenly light came back in on our songs and our career.
Wherever our heads were at, we could still play, and it sounded great. It was really sparky and fiery in a way that it hadn't been towards the end. So it was a good move.
Jools came back into the band. Gilson had sobered up his life and came back into the band We did a couple of shows, we got a new bass player, and before we knew where we were making another album.
I'm guilty as guilty, but there's no place like home. There's no place like
It was lovely to be back and to be all rowing in the same direction as well. I think we all did quite a bit of growing up in the sort of layoff period.
By the time we got back together, we'd all learned a lot more about what we wanted to do and what we wanted out of it. I think when you go into something, it's better to be clear about what everybody's expecting out of it. Then nobody's sort of cross or disappointed about it afterwards.
Jools was back in the band. He was flying in and out of the band doing the tube, and we got our second lease of life. So we were really lucky. The whole thing started to lift again.
I'm guilty, so let me be stoned.
My memory of them at that time was like, yeah, they're making it happen. As a fan, it just felt like, yeah, they just picked up where they left off, and they're moving forward.
Of course, the musical landscape had changed enormously by the time they came back, and I don't think Squeeze ever recovered their ground commercially, and you had to be much more aware of visuals. It wasn't anymore just about the songs.
Obviously, that's via MTV and the rise of people like Madonna and Michael Jackson. These people who are just inconceivable without the visuals.
We'd always had fun in our videos. The one we did for Hourglass was great, and again, that suited us because it was fun.
When Squeeze started being pushed into that mould, I certainly wasn't very comfortable with it, but we made a fist of it and did our best in all those circumstances. But it's never something that I enjoyed.
I spent too much money, looked far too bad. Now I have so little of what I once had.
The recording of the video for Footprints was in Salt Lake City, up in the mountains, on the snow-covered mountains, which represented the cocaine of my life at the time, I suppose. Glenn and I had the most awful falling out that day prior to the shoot. We were walking from the minibus to take the first shot, and Glenn pulled me to one side, and we had the most awful set to. And the rest of the day was completely ruined. It was just like driven by drugs. It was everything you imagined other bands did,
The party's over, it's going home time.
Wow. I rather like that video. See, it's weird, isn't it? In spite of everything I've said, I thought the band actually felt quite together at that point. It felt good to me. We'd grown somehow, not with the record sales to match it, but selling tickets, we were doing amazing business.
The trouble was we were touring so much, and I had other things that I wanted to do. I had more music that I wanted to do, and also I was doing a film somewhere else, making my own records, and one thing had to go.
His public and private personality were blossoming, they were growing, and he was starting to outgrow his place in Squeeze.
I thought, well, I'm going to have to bow out again. So I did.
He had his eye on other things, and I felt like he'd used us. And that anger, plus some other issues I had with him, stayed with me for quite a while.
Glenn had this great ambition for us to live together in Los Angeles in a house in the canyon, write songs.
What I didn't realise is that Chris wasn't in a state really ready to do that.
I was there one night and I said, no, I want to be on my own. So I rented a place about 20 miles away because I just wanted to be on my own so I could take drugs and drink. I had to reach out for help, and the only way of doing that for me in those days was to write it down in a lyric. That was how I was communicating, not just to the world outside, but to people around me close by.
This lyric, The Truth, when I got it from Chris, it was, he was obviously not a happy chappy. Musically, we went all around houses before we got it simple, so this is the truth.
I've lied to you, I've cheated too, so what friend can I be? But still you stick through thick and thin, hoping that you'll change me. I've told the line, then fell behind, our love began to wait. The pressure grew and then I knew that things were not the same. The truth, it's the toughest thing to explain. The truth, playing tricks with me again. When the truth has to be told, my blood runs hot and cold. The truth is not my middle name.
The truth says everything about what was going on in those days for me. And the way that Glenn put the lyrics to the music is just beautiful. It's exactly what it should be. It's a fantastically powerful song.
It's about being deceitful, it's about what the truth is, and it's something I could identify with. I think it's something that Chris felt. And how hard it is to tell the truth sometimes.
When the truth has to be told, my blood runs hot and cold. The truth is not my middle name.
I think he was getting ready to fess up and, you know, throw the towel in with drinking and that.
I just couldn't take it anymore, and I just put my hands in the air and got a good friend of mine lifted me up and took me into rehab.
When he came out, it was a very emotional time, and it was great because there was something of Chris there that I recognised. I felt really happy for him, and we were communicating. And in spite of all the stuff we'd been through, there was enough there for us to latch hold of and actually begin to enjoy again.
At that time, there was just like lots of ideas flying around. It's literally like I'd cleaned out my head and gave it some space for some new words, you know.
She gave to me her tenderness, her friendship and her love. I see her face from time to time, then the sky above.
This song was about Maxine, who'd died from leukemia a couple of years before, who'd been the person that I went out with, my first love, and the woman had said, answer the ad, go and meet this guy, you know.
I started the lyric, I didn't lift the pen off the page. When it got to the end, I finished it, I faxed it to Glenn. That was it. That is exactly the lyric.
It was really, really moving. And I sat down and the tune just tumbled out. It was really great. It was fantastic. It was one of those times where you don't even think about what you're doing.
Her smile could lift me from the pain I often found within. She said some things I won't forget. She made a few bells ring. So simple her humility, her beauty found in grace. Today she lives another life in some fantastic place.
Yeah, just in Chris's way, expresses something really sweetly.
Very cunningly, he put a guitar solo in Some Fantastic Place, which was actually one of the first guitar solos he ever wrote for one of our songs, but we never used. So he lifted it from a song that we'd written in 1973.
It just worked really well. It was just one of those happy accident coincidences that it worked. That's my favourite song.
For me, Some Fantastic Place is the perfect Squeeze album, and I think it's scandalous how few records it sold and how the singles just disappeared. And I think it must have really been getting to the band by this stage. They must have been realising it's over for us in a way, in terms of being having commercial success.
The record company were pushing all the time. They wanted us to have hits. A&R, they would come down to the studio and say, no, that's not right. Do you think we could get it mixed by so-and-so? You know, that whole genre of making music had started to take effect, which didn't suit Squeeze at all.
Rather than being left to our own devices, as we were, largely, we started working with a succession of people, and whether I was involved or not is almost irrelevant, because the brief is it's got to be big and, you know, contemporary sounding.
Love you today.
The record company threw a lot of money at Heaven Knows. They spent a lot of money on the video. It became used in a movie, and I think Glenn really didn't like the fact that that the band were being led really by a record company.
It was like a circus, you know. We were jumping through hoops to try and please the people who thought they knew how we should sound, and you end up pleasing no one.
Glenn and I, our communication had got worse again. I think he wanted one thing, I wanted another, but I wasn't sure what the other thing was. And we had yet another American tour number 59 or whatever it was. And I just thought, I've got to stop.
I felt really disappointed when Chris told me. It was all I'd ever known. So it was not nice. But it really was for the best.
As Glenn puts it, I left the building and left him to turn the lights out.
Heaven knows you got to open up somehow. I can take it out.
I sort of thought to myself, well, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do now. And I just thought, well, let's just try and make a record, write with some other people, write by yourself.
You showed interest in me when I was outside looking in. How is it you got to be?
Various things that have made me feel really insecure were gone. This huge cloud had lifted.
Glenn and I didn't speak to each other for 9 years. We went in different directions. And, I watched his career from over a hedge a bit. Watched him recording solo albums, and I went to see him play a couple of times in incognito, just to see what was going on, just to make sure what I was missing or what I wasn't missing. And I went off and went into management, but the songwriter side of me was the thing that I needed to nurture.
I love my sweet brother, his voice makes me cry. We sing for forgiveness as time passes us by. My brother was gifted, he had a great voice, not like the other young Battersea boys.
My brother died about 5 years ago, and he was just the biggest Squeeze fan, loved the band, and when he died it kind of opened some communication to Glenn. It was very genuine, and I said it'd be great to get together, you know, we sort of talked about it, and then we talked very loosely about getting back on the road, and then we had a lunch where we agreed terms, and it kind of started there.
So on a limited edition basis, with all the exit doors open, we agreed to do some dates.
Tempted by the fruit of another, tempted by the truth is discovered, tempted by the fruit of another, tempted by the truth is discovered. What's been going on?
I think the most important thing was to honour our songs, our songwriting, and to cover our own songs in a way that would make us feel proud and make our audience sit up and listen.
The truth of it is, if the song is alive to you, the ideas in the song or the emotion in the song is alive to you, then even if people's initial reason for wanting to hear it is because it's a memory to them, it creates a new memory at the moment of performance, and that's my theory, and I'm sure that's what they feel when they return to those songs, because they would be rewarding because they're strong.
Take me and yours, because dreams are made of this. Forever there'll be a heaven in your kiss.
The 50p that I took out of my mum's purse to put that advert in the sweet shop window in Blackheath to form a band in 1973, I mean, it's the most amazing 50p I've ever spent in my entire life. So I'm extraordinarily grateful that Glenn was the only person to pick up the phone.
I would never have come up with those stories, those lyrics. I might have written great tunes, but I don't know if anyone would ever have heard them, because I think they would have been accompanied by some very dull observations. You've got to keep it fresh, you know, and I think that's hard to do. That's hard for any band to do, and I think we've got to work hard at that all the time. And if we can't do that, we've got to man up and say, it's time to pull the plug again.
I don't think any band can just balance on their history. You know, you have to put out new stuff. And although it's not, you know, there are very few bands of our age that manage to do it successfully, I think. But that's just what you live with, I think. You know, you've got to keep your own spirit alive.
Yep, I agree with that.
Good night.
This has been Noel Cowden, Arthur Mullard, and we're bidding you good night.